Welcome back, travelers, to a particularly interesting legendary lore, because this is a bit of a rant at first. It's going to start off as a rant. Don't click off. Just to be clear, there is going to be actual lore. But first, I just want to point out that there were 4 mythic legendaries in each color. There was a blue one with the Merfolk God. Ragavan was the red one. There were like 2 green ones, but one of them was technically multicolored. So we'll just call it Thrasta as the green one. And then, of course, there was the black mythic. So you had these 4 mythic legendary creatures, one for each color. Obviously, also, there were 24 mythics revealed in the set, so obviously there had to be a 25th, right? Wrong. There was no 25th mythic. And I believe, as a result, there was no white mythic legendary creature. But Joe, there was a hint at a future white legendary creature. And I saw it, and I knew it to be true, because it was Break Ties. And it was such an interesting idea. Because in that artwork for Break Ties, it showed an amulet with Urza and Kayla Bin Kroog. Now, in previous Modern Horizons, you had original Urza. And original Urza had been a huge splash, obviously. So it would only make sense to continue Urza's story by having Kayla be one of the legendary creatures of this set. And she would fit perfectly into the mono white mold. But she wasn't there. Joe, is what I'm saying making sense?
Yes.
So what this episode is, this special edition of Legendary Lore, this is going to be the first time we talk about a character who does not yet have a card. And, I mean, obviously, at some point in the future, Kayla Bin Kroog will get her due. I am sure of it. But we'll have to sit through like 6 more variations of Jace first. So, let's go ahead, talk about Kayla Bin Kroog, shall we? So, the story of Kayla begins when Urza, obviously it's connected very strongly to Urza because she at the time was basically written just to be a reason for Urza to get the power he has. So this is basically before the Brothers' War begins. And she shows up at this little repair shop. There's a clockmaker. And she's like, I have this family heirloom. I need it fixed up. She, of course, is in the Yoshan capital of Kroog. Yoshia being the name of their country that they live in. And so in Kroog, Kayla Bin Kroog, she is there and she meets this guy, this man named Urza. And Urza sees her and he's like, oh, cool. And doesn't really think about it. But Kayla immediately is like, I like that. I like all that. I like this man. This is a good man. This is good stock. And so she likes him. But she's like, you know what? I can't do anything about that because obviously I'm a princess. My father, the warlord of Kroog, he's the ruler of all of Yoshia, and I'm already been promised to a prince from another country because obviously she's just a piece to be used. And so while she's waiting for to marry this guy, he dies in a shipwreck. And she's like, oh no, oh, that's unfortunate. I'm sorry. My husband to be is dead. That's very unfortunate, isn't it, Joe? So what happens next is that her father's like, there's only one way to handle this. We need the strongest man alive to marry my daughter. And then when that happens, he'll have the strength of a warrior and the grace of my daughter, and will be able to do literally anything. And so he's completely unaware that he's thinking of like, he wants Goliath or Samson to be the husband of Kayla. So he's making all these super impossible tasks, right? Mm-hmm. And so all of this is happening as the talk of the town. You have all these strongmen coming from across the entirety of Dominaria just so they can get with this princess and have access to all of the riches and the beauty that she has, right? And so this is happening, and obviously Urza's in Kroog, and he's just kind of like, oh, that's nice. Yeah, she's nice. She looks cool. I'm just going to continue working with my little ornithopter. Look at that. And he's making little toys and things like that because he's content just to create, and that's what he wants to do. And so while it's happening, Rusko, who's the master clockmaker, is he's the one who took Urza under his wing because he realized that he just had natural talent, right?
So Urza's still young at this point.
Yes, Urza is still relatively young. He's a man, but he's a young man. And so while that's all happening, Urza's like, well, I just noticed that you have a pretty good dowry. It's not even the riches that I care about. I don't care about the goblets or the crowns, the jewels. I'm seeing some tomes there that are looking pretty good. I like that tome. I want to read that tome. And so for Urza, he's thinking of Kayla as a library card. And it really kind of shows Urza's characterization where he can't even be bothered to be romantic. And for him, he looks at the problem that the king is presenting. In this case, it's a giant jade statue that a person is supposed to move, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's super heavy and no one can do it. So then Urza shows up and he's like, Your Highness, I can move this statue. And he's like, go ahead. I don't think you can do it. And so he goes, I can do it. Despite my wobbly arms, I can do it. And I'll do it with my mind.
Who thinks he can move the statue?
You can't move the statue. What are you going to do? Move it with your mind? You psychic? No, you're not psychic.
Best thing I've ever seen.
What do you think I've ever seen? So what happens is that Urza had created this giant clockwork machine that lifted it up and put it where it was supposed to be. And the warlord is like, what did you just do? I moved it with my mind, which built the machine that is stronger than any man. And so the warlord is obviously kind of upset about this, but at the same time, Rusko basically approaches him, the master clockmaker, and he's like, hey, guess what? We can make a ton of those for you, Your Highness. And so the warlord's like, look, Urza, if you want, you can marry my daughter, but you got to make me 1,000 of those things. He's like, okay. He goes, make it 1,000,000 of those things. He goes, I can do it. And so because of that, Urza and Kayla get married. And it's funny because at first, obviously, Urza is completely negligent. It's super messed up because, obviously he has his new wife, they're newlyweds, and she likes Urza. She fell in love with Urza when she first met him. Mm-hmm. And she married him. She married the person she loved, and he could not care less. And so Urza just keeps building things, going into his workshop and making more and more things. And she's getting more and more lonely. And she obviously is feeling like she's just been trapped. And so she meets Urza's newest apprentice, Tanos. And Tanos is just as smart as Urza. Urza is maybe brilliant, but Tanos is a human being that's also really smart. And so she starts kind of being like, hey, Tanos, how you doing? You like princesses? Want to come to my castle? And Tanos is like, no. I am completely loyal to Urza. He is my best friend, and he is my master. He is my teacher. I could never do anything to betray him.
I'm going to go work on my thopter
now. I'm going to think long and hard about my thopters now. 1 little, 2 little, 3 little thopters, 4 little, 5 little, 6 little thopters. So Kayla's really just kind of upset. But she kind of has to put that aside because while all that's happening in the Falaji lands, Falaji being basically like the desert tribes, they are starting to get, they're starting to get attacked. All the archaeological digs are suddenly being attacked. Argivians, Corlisians, the Yotians, all of them, these are 3 different countries, by the way, all of them are being attacked and their Thran artifacts are being stolen. So you have the warlord of Yosha, and then you have the Kadir of the Falaji lands. And then the Argivians and the Corlisians are kind of like a smaller group, but they're still a kingdom. And so all 4 of them agree to a summit. And at the summit, they're going to try and shake out whatever it is they need to figure out to get things right. But the warlord, because obviously he has Urza and all of his crazy contraptions, he's like, you know what? Forget compromise. I can just go in and wreck the place and take everything over, and I'll get all 4 kingdoms at once. Super simple and easy. And so Urza's like, are you sure you want to do that? And he's like, yeah, obviously. Urza's like, fine, got all my ornithopters ready, and we'll take them all out. It's going to be easy as cake. So they go and they do it, and the Kadir's like, oh, I see you have a super genius on your side making robots for you. Well, guess what? And so I like to imagine that the Kadir just like snaps his fingers, and like he has two slaves just pull a curtain down, and then there's Mishra standing there. And at this point,
I like to more imagine there's a giant guy like holding Mishra on a backpack. It's like this big muscly guy in the stands, just like, I gotta get out of here.
So Urza did not know that Mishra was alive. At this point, he thought he was dead.
Is this after the confrontation in Argoth?
No, this is Argoth. Definitely, Mishra died at that point. But this is in the past, way in the past. Like they were still young people. They weren't even in control of their own kingdoms at this point, obviously because of the Kadir and all that. So Kayla is super upset because in this kerfuffle, the warlord is killed. Her father is defeated. On some level, Kayla blames Urza because if it hadn't been for Urza's machines, her father probably wouldn't have been as confident as he was in his ability to take over the place. And he probably would be alive because they would have actually been able to talk about things and get to an agreement, right? Mm-hmm. So Kayla's talking to Thanos, and she is desperate at this point. She is so starved for human connection. And literally the only two people she could talk to are Urza, who is a stone golemed-faced man, and Thanos, who is loyal to a fault. She can't talk to her little servants or whatever because they're afraid of her. She's the queen now. And so eventually Kayla actually talks to Urza. And Urza, it turns out, is just as sad about the marriage as Kayla is. The two of them are able to like kind of talk about things, and they actually kind of like create a connection. And they realize that they can come to terms over the warlord's death and actually be together. And they have an actual kind of normal marriage, all things considered. And Kayla, of course, is like, well, the brothers, if they can talk, we can actually get around all this stuff. And so this time, the Falaji meet the Yotians, just one-on-one, those two. And this time at the capital of Kroog. And Urza and Mishra, they hug it out, and they're talking about, like, we're sorry, and this stuff, I missed you, and what have you been working on? I've been working on this. We both love artifice. I've been working on this. This is super cool. They talk about their childhoods and all that stuff. And things look good. Things look like they have a pretty good bit. And Kayla's like, you know, I love Urza and all, but he's kind of a little pasty for my taste. Mishra's got like that tan. He's got that dark curly hair. He's got those dark brooding eyes. He's just a very handsome, sensual man. And so
revives you in Fortnite, tells you daddy's here.
Well, that's not entirely wrong. So basically, Mishra's there, and then he tells them, look, these are what the Falaji want. They want control of the sword marches, which are ancient Falaji lands that were supposed to be their legacies, the legacy of Kayla. And all that happens, and she's like, you know what? Fine, that's okay. That's okay. This concession is fine. This concession is fine. I'm okay with that. And then Mishra tells her, I want Urza's stone. Now, we haven't had a legendary lore on Urza's stones yet, but to be clear, there's the Might Stone and the Weak Stone. The Weak Stone is able to shut down any artifact it comes in contact with, while the Might Stone can power up any artifact basically indefinitely. And so Mishra wants that stone. He already has the Weak Stone. And so not only can it power up artifacts, but basically what Urza would do is all he has to do is put it next to his head, and his mind is cleared. And he can basically get rid of all his writer block. Imagine if you had something that you could just get rid of writer block in an instant.
I'd probably be successful.
Same. So that's what's crazy about it. And so Urza, she goes to Urza and is like, hey, all you have to do is give him your rock, and we win, basically. And Urza's like, no! Why would you do that? And so
fool.
Kayla during the night, steals the Might Stone from Urza and goes to Mishra's bedroom to give him the stone. And so...
Is that what he calls it?
There is rumor that despite the fact that Urza and Kayla were having a healthy relationship prior to this whole thing, that this could have been when Urza's son was conceived, because no one knows what happened during that moment when she went to visit Mishra. And so during that time, Urza and Tanos discover this plot, and then Mishra starts basically arguing with Urza because he comes in to get back his Might Stone. And basically, when he does, everything's terrible. And Kayla just kind of starts going more and more into a reclusive state, secluding herself, because obviously she did betray her husband. And Urza cannot look at her. He kind of just like, he's filled with this hate, and because like he thought he was in a good place and he had just gotten back with his brother. Everything was going well. And suddenly everything was terrible. And Urza literally travels. He leaves the kingdom to search the Falaji lands for his brother, which of course left the kingdom of Yosha completely open. And Mishra is able to sack Kroog, take it over. And Tanos and Kayla run away. At this point, she's pregnant with child, and they escape. And the entire place is under Mishra's control, because Mishra has basically taken control of both Falaji lands and everything else. So while that's all happening, Kayla and Tanos are wandering the wastelands, and Kayla gives birth to Harbin. So while they're in the wilderness, Tanos is trying to figure out, where's Urza? Because I know that nothing can kill that fool, because Mishra's not dead. Where are they? And so if Mishra's not dead, Urza's not dead, because there's no way Urza's going to go down and while Mishra's still in power, because he knows his master like that, right? Mm-hmm. So Tanos eventually finds out that Urza is working for Argive. And so that country, which is where he's originally from, Urza's originally from Argive, he's making a ton of artifacts there for their defenses to be able to fight off the Falaji. And Tanos and Kayla and Harbin eventually get to Urza's tower. It's worth noting at this point that Urza has a ton of power plants. He has mines. He has workshops. He's got the whole deal, right?
Oh, I get it.
So they go to Urza's tower, and he's there, and he sees Kayla, he sees Tanos, and then he sees his supposed son. And he finds it really, really hard to like see his dark-haired son and be like, that is my boy. It's my boy. He belongs to me. He's of my seed. It's very hard for him to like accept that. So while that's happening, Mishra's forces continuously pound away on Argive. And of course, Kayla's there, and she knows that the Kadir, the Falaji, is dead. He died during the assault on Kroog. Mishra's in control. So now it's literally just Mishra and Urza. Urza's the commander-in-chief, basically, of Argive's army. The Argivian army belongs to Urza, and Mishra's the other side. Also, it's worth noting, Urza had actually absorbed Yosha and Corliss. Like, he absorbed like parts of those countries to basically have two superpowers on the continent. And they just keep going back at each other. So Kayla is like basically useless now because her kingdom is gone. She is the princess of a fallen kingdom.
Queen of a fallen kingdom.
And so she's queen of a fallen, good point. So she basically just has to raise her son as best as she can. And she arranges a marriage and all this other stuff. And so she's trying to get her son to be well off and safe and away from the war because she knows it's going to be an all-out, knockdown, drag-out fight kind of thing, right?
She arranges a marriage for herself or for her son?
For her son. Because she's still married to Urza. She still considers herself to be bound to Urza. Which, because of that, I choose to believe it is actually Urza's son. Because otherwise,
if she didn't leave him then I don't think she would have
Exactly. Because if anything, if it was Mishra's kid, she would have gone to Mishra.
That would have been best for her son.
I think that would have made sense.
Yeah.
So, because that would have been an actual loving individual, someone who's warmer than he is, or at least she would think so. So, she wants him to get married, and Harbin's like, no, I'm going to join the army. Technically, he's going to join the Air Force, because he wants to be an ornithopter pilot, like his father before him.
Nice.
And so, Thanos says, look, Urza, I know you want to be a pilot. Kayla, I know you want him to not die. So how about we agree?
Harbin.
Harbin will just be a scout. And so they send him on scouting missions. So on one of these, he disappears. And Kayla and her daughter-in-law, so he did get married, are really worried that he's dead. Until eventually he comes back and he's like, I discovered this super cool continent with a ton of natural resources that could turn the tide of the war. And so Harbin starts basically planning for Urza to go to Argoth. And Kayla then hears about Mishra. Mishra had also found the land and knew that Urza was going to be there and that the two of them were going to get into a big fight. And she knew in her heart that this was going to be the last time she saw them. And so she said goodbye to Urza. She knew he was too blinded basically by his own ambition to recognize what was about to happen. So Thanos leaves with Urza. Harbin's gone too. She knows it's over. It says right here, Dominaria's tears filled the sky as fiery comets from the heavens. Entire nations were leveled. The climate was changed for the worse. This is what caused the Ice Age. Argoth, an entire continent, sank beneath the seas. Urza, Mishra, Harbin, and Thanos were gone forever. And so, throughout all that happened, Kayla kind of was content, despite everything, because all the terrible things in her life were dead. Everything causing trouble for her was over. And Harbin's son, Jarsil, was still alive. And then she eventually meets Thanos again. And Thanos is like, okay, look, it was really crazy. I got put in a coffin, and the coffin was indestructible. And when the coffin was destroyed, I came out of the coffin and I was fine. Thanos' coffin. It's an actual card. You can look it up. It'll be on the screen most likely. So Thanos tells her Urza died, killing his brother and wiping out both armies. But that the last thing on Urza's dying lips were her name. Thanos wanted to give her that comfort. And Kayla's like, forget you. I know you're lying. Urza didn't care about me. Especially at that point. He just saw me as a person that needed to be protected. He didn't care about me in a personal way. He couldn't care about anyone like that. So all that...
Thanos is like, you're wrong. He cared about me like that.
He showed me his ornithopter. So Kayla, in her final moments, in the waning years of her life, she wrote a epic poem called The Antiquity Wars. She wrote Urza's saga. It's because of her that future nations knew about about what happened on the continent of Terracer. She died peacefully in the comfort of her friends and family, and she basically became immortal as one of the most important historians for one of the most massive moments in Magic's history.
Wow.
Tell me she doesn't deserve a card. She's so cool. And she has such a human element that is lacking in a lot of these old stories. And I just feel like it's her life. And she's been put in, she has such a promising beginning. And she's kind of forced to be a side character. Obviously, she's a side character because it's a story about Urza. But she's forced into this event where she has nothing. And she just kind of has to try and build something out of it. It is worth noting, she is specifically from the Brothers' War book. So that's kind of cool. She is exclusively from the story of the Brothers' War. It's one of my favorite. It's I'd say second favorite Magic novel. First one being, of course, The Thran, which I did talk about a ton of during our original story.
It's one of our longest legendary lores.
Yes. It's so good. I love this. I love it all. And I mean, this is already trying to fight for a long episode, so we're just going to cut it here. But Oh my gosh, it's such a good story. And Kayla was robbed. She deserved to be the white mythic legendary for this set. She needed to be the 25th mythic. It makes no sense for there to not be anything like that. Joe, you know what? I'm going to keep talking. Just take it away. Take it away, Joe.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and catch you guys next time with some whatever playthroughs coming up. So don't miss it, and leave a like if you think Kayla deserved a card.
You better like it.